What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's Kevin Forte, and today we are back and we are taking a look and recapping the 2025 NHL Draft. Now, I just want to say, this draft is very interesting for a multitude of reasons. It didn't necessarily have the fireworks that we were hoping for. It was a 4-hour show, which kind of, in a sense, does suck. But it's one of those things where when you look at the draft, and just what it means for teams like the Islanders and the Blackhawks and some of these other teams we're going to mention here in a minute, it was really an important draft for a lot of different teams. Obviously, the players involved, massive impact on their lives now. This is something they've been working for their entire lives, and now they are officially inducted into the National Hockey League. They have a lot of work to go to get their first game in the NHL, and even beyond that, on their quest to winning a Stanley Cup and awards and their personal accolades. But this is where it begins. So let's start off at that number one selection. So for the first time since the 1973 NHL draft, the Islanders selected first overall, but they also selected a defenseman. And that is why I'm wearing Dennis Potvin's jersey, because the Islanders selected Dennis Potvin with that pick. And this time around, the Islanders selected from the Erie Otters, Matthew Schaefer. He was the unanimous first overall pick. The Islanders made the best selection of the entire draft because he is the best player in this year's draft. At 17 years old, he managed to get himself into a position where he could get drafted. He only played 17 games with the Erie Otters last season. He had a broken clavicle, and he picked up 24 points in 17 games. So pretty solid for a defenseman. He has an incredible high hockey IQ, and his skating ability, everything is off the charts. This is a phenomenal pick for the Islanders. There is a chance he could make the team out of camp. We'll see how things go. We'll talk about the Islanders a little bit later. We're going to go in order. Number 2, Michael Misa to the Sharks. Great pickup for them. It was a kind of a debate on whether they were going to take Misa or Frondell. Frondell really raised his draft stock toward the end, and it looked like he could potentially jump to that number 2 spot. Good job by the Sharks. I think a lot of Sharks fans wanted Michael Misa. He's probably the best all-around goal scorer in this draft, so it's a great pickup for them. You add that on top of who they already have in guys like Macklin Celebrini, Eklund. That's a phenomenal team they're building in San Jose. So Will Greer, shout out to him. Kind of an easy pick. It was either going to be Schaefer or Misa for him, I think, when it all came down to it, depending on what the Islanders would do. Great pickup there for the Sharks. Now, number 3, we're going to move through a little bit quicker. Anton Frondell of the SHL, one of the only Swedes taken, the first Swede taken off the board, goes to the Blackhawks. Not really a lot of debate there. There was some maybe question about whether that was going to end up being Caleb Denoye or maybe James Higgins. There was that conversation even at the number 3 pick. But they end up going with Frondell. Makes a lot of sense. Again, we talked about this in our preview for our top 10 mock draft. This makes a lot of sense here. This is another guy, again, you're adding on top of Frank Nazar, Ethan Del Maestro as kind of the Blackhawks' future core. This was a no-brainer for them. Any of the guys they were going to pick there, I think for the Blackhawks, it was kind of good for them because they were able to pick whoever they wanted of that group, whether it was Frondell or Denoye or some of these other guys we're going to mention here later on. It was an easy pick for them. And number 4, we got another Canadian off the board here going to the Utah Mammoth, and that was centerman Caleb Denoye. Really solid player. He's done a lot of winning recently in the QMJHL, so obviously he's bringing that winning pedigree whenever he gets into the NHL when that time arrives. That is a valuable thing to have under your pocket, and I think that's kind of the situation here with Denoye. Really good pickup again. You're adding on top of what they already have there in Utah. It's hard to deny that they have a pretty good group they're building in Utah. It's just not right now, and that's frustrating. They want to win now. They're building it with the right pieces, though, and I think patience is a virtue. Patience is frustrating because I think that franchise has dealt with a lot of patience and not a lot of success beyond that. So we'll see what happens this time around, but really good pickup there. Now, this is where things started to get a little bit interesting at number 5, and the Nashville Predators end up going with Brady Martin. This was kind of an interesting pick because a lot of people were kind of under the assumption that this is where maybe Roger McQueen or Jake O'Brien or Porter Martone were going to go, or even James Higgins. Brady Martin moves up a little bit. There was consideration he was going to go in the top 10 to 15 range. He goes a little bit earlier than that. He ends up going into the top 5. So interesting pickup there by Barry Trotz. Not exactly what we had going at number 5, But that leaves a couple of guys on the board for the Philadelphia Flyers, which they end up getting the guy they really wanted. And Danny Briere made it a point. He wants this to be a physical, big team. Adding Porter Martone is definitely a step in that direction. This ends up being the first winger taken off the board. Everybody else was centers before that. He played in the OHL with the Brampton Steelheads. Great pickup here again for the Flyers. Again, it fits that Flyers DNA of the Broad Street Bullies, and we'll talk about what they did later in the draft with another selection in the first round. Very similar. We'll talk about that later, but it definitely fit a lot for the Flyers. And this is the pick that definitely disappointed me as an Islander fan. The only thing that could have made this draft better was the Islanders picking up the kid from Hauppauge, and that is how you pronounce it. It is Hauppauge. That's Long Island names. You look up Long Island like town names. They're all like that. They're all Indian inspired, or whatever you want to call them, Native American, whatever you want to call it. Don't want to be politically incorrect, but you get what I'm saying. James Higgins from Hauppauge, Long Island. He ends up going to Boston and the Boston Bruins. And this is not the first time the Bruins have taken Long Island players. Charlie McAvoy was an example not that long ago. He was a New York native, was a Rangers fan growing up, ends up going to Boston. There was a lot of consideration about maybe, back in the day, the Bruins were trying to get Adam Fox from the Calgary Flames and the Carolina Hurricanes. That never ended up materializing. But this is a known thing for the Bruins to poach those Long Island, New York metro area kids. And they do it again here. Now, the difference here is obviously he played at Boston College with the Boston College Eagles. This isn't like a foreign thought here. I mean, Don Sweeney loves picking up his BC guys. I totally understand that. I'm sure Cole Eiserman, the Islanders prospect, was a little disappointed his buddy wasn't going to join him there with the Islanders. We'll see how things go in the future. But as of now, James Higgins is a member of the Boston Bruins. Congratulations to him. I'm very happy. He ended up getting drafted in the top 10. He's going to have a little chip on his shoulder, I'm sure, especially because the Islanders didn't select him. There was consideration that the Flyers were going to take him. Even Nashville at 5, there was consideration that they were going to take him. So we'll see what happens the rest of the way for James Higgins. I wish him the best. And hopefully he represents Long Island well. So we'll see how things go there. Number 8, Jake O'Brien ends up going to the Seattle Kraken. Another OHL draft pick here. I really like Jake O'Brien. Again, for Seattle, there's another guy. He's going to, the thing is with the Kraken, they need as much of this younger talent coming in. Because one of the big criticisms for the Kraken right now has been that this team just... unfortunately, they're just known for having a lot of middle six forwards and don't have any star forwards that can score 30, 40, 50 goals a season. They have a lot of tweener forwards. So picking up a guy like Jake O'Brien hopefully is going to be the solution to that. Radim Murtaka ends up going to the Buffalo Sabres, so the first check off the board. Really big defenseman. I think he's 6'8", something like that. He's a big kid. And I think that this, again, for the Buffalo Sabres, depending on what direction they go here moving forward, if they end up moving Owen Power and some of those other defensemen, that's going to be a big blue line. Just considering what they already have there, this is a big, punishing blue line for the Buffalo Sabres. That is definitely a message being sent there. This is an interesting pick. This could end up being really good for Buffalo. It might be one of those situations where, you kind of get caught looking at the size and the height and everything like that, and then he ends up not developing. So we'll see how things go there. Number 10, the Anaheim Ducks. Really good pickup here for the Anaheim Ducks. A lot of concern about his injury, but Roger McQueen is now a part of the Disney family, and Lightning McQueen, which obviously Disney made sure to push that out the day of. They had Roger McQueen wearing a number 95 jersey. It was kind of funny, but besides the point. Again, I think he fell in the draft because of his injuries. But if this kid ends up being as good as his potential probably says he should be, and injuries aren't an issue, Roger McQueen could be a steal at number 10 for Anaheim. And Anaheim already has a lot of good young players, especially up front. So Roger McQueen coming in, maybe give him 2 years to develop, let him grow his game. But this is going to be a good pickup, like I said, for the Ducks, if he can stay healthy, which, again, you only have so much control over. Your body does certain things. This is a risky pick, but at number 10, I think it's a worthy risk for the Anaheim Ducks, and they took the best player off the board at that point. So we're going to skip around a little bit here, but I did want to talk specifically about number 11, and the Pittsburgh Penguins selecting Benjamin Kindle. So this combination of picks here, so Pittsburgh was supposed to have pick 11 and 12. They end up trading number 12 to the Philadelphia Flyers to draft Jack Nesbitt. But I want to talk about number 11 for the Penguins here too, because they end up taking Benjamin Kindle, who a lot of people had as a later first round pick, maybe even an early second round pick. Definitely a reach at number 11 for the Pittsburgh Penguins. A lot of people are really not sure what to think of it. Honestly, I am not a huge fan of that trade. I'm not a fan of who they drafted with number 11. It just seems like would have been better off trading both 11 and 12 for something else. Like, they just seems like they just kind of like a missed opportunity here. I'm not really sure what Kyle Dubas and the Penguins were thinking. Definitely an interesting choice of picks there. Jackson Smith, the defenseman from the Tri-City Americans, a big WHL defenseman. Jackson Smith goes to the Blue Jackets. I like that pickup. The Islanders, because of the trades they made earlier in the day with the Montreal Canadiens, trading Noah Dobson, they picked up picks 16 and 17. So the Islanders ended up selecting another guy from Djurgården of the SHL. This last name might sound familiar, San Jose Shark fans, is Victor Eklund, right winger from Djurgården of the SHL. A really good pickup for the Islanders. This is the lonely forward they picked up in the first round of this year's draft. A really good pickup, though, again, in the sense that the Islanders need more young forwards, and that can score. And Victor Eklund definitely falls into that category. And not only that, I think because of, some of these interesting picks, like, the Blue Jackets going out and getting Jackson Smith, Jack Nesbitt, and Benjamin and Kindle kind of getting picked up where they did, the Islanders kind of got guys that were projected to go in the top 10, like Kayshawn Aitchison, who I think that's how you pronounce it, Aitchison. Kayshawn Aitchison. Now, I'm sure if you follow on social media, there was a lot of highlights of Kayshawn after the draft and who the Islanders selected, and I was impressed. I didn't really know much about Aitchison. I do know a little bit more about him now. He's a big defenseman, and he likes to throw hits. He's a physical presence on the blue line. And for the Islanders, you look at the Islanders' kind of DNA on the back end over the last decade. Anywhere between Zdeno Chara, Johnny Boychuk. I'm trying to remember some of the other defensemen the Islanders have had. They have big defensemen that aren't afraid to throw a hit. Mark Streit, maybe a smaller example of that, but an example of that. The Islanders are known to have a big bruiser on the blue line, and this would definitely fall into that, definitely more so that category of Boychuk and Chara. I really like the even, who was it? Was it Savard? Who was that defenseman the Islanders picked up? Seidenberg. Dennis Seidenberg, I think, if I remember correctly. Those types of defensemen really fit in well, and I think for the Islanders, he's going to get a lot of attention on Long Island, especially now with Matt Martin and Clutterbuck retiring. The Islanders, they need that presence on the back end, and specifically just on the team, that physical presence, and he's a good player too, which I think is really important for the Islanders. You want that combination of speed, skill, size, and just that nasty agitator ability. And I think that's what really made the Panthers so successful this year is they have that nasty edge to them. And teams have a hard time beating them in a 7-game series because they just get worn out. After Game 5, most of these teams have been worn out by the Florida Panthers through the first 4 games of the series, and they just get grinded down little by little. And a guy like Kayshawn Aitchison could definitely do that for a team like the Islanders. So we'll see how that goes. Who else do we want to talk about? Oh, so the Blue Jackets also made another pick in the top 20. So the 20th pick, they take Peter Andreanov, who was the first goaltender off the board. I believe the only Russian off the board in the first round of this year's draft. He played in the MHL with Krasnaya Armia. I definitely didn't pronounce that right, but we weren't really sure what was going to happen with the goalies in this year's draft, especially in the first round, if there would be one. And it ended up being Peter Andreanov. So we'll see how that goes. We've seen a couple of, early first-round pick goaltenders not really work out so well recently. So we'll see how this one goes. We'll see what the one in Detroit ends up doing potentially next season, but with Wallstead. But this is definitely an interesting pick at number 20. We know the Russian goalies, they do tend to do really well in the NHL. So we'll see how things go there. Nashville with their second pick at 21 overall took Cameron Reed. Pittsburgh, with their second pick in the round, they moved back. They ended up taking Bill Zonin with the 22nd selection. Again, another weird pick. Like, people just really weren't sure. I mean, it seems more likely that he ends up just being a guy that is a bottom six. He's more certain to be a bottom six player than any real, like, they're pretty safe in saying that's what he's going to be. So why did they take that with a first round selection? Kind of interesting there by the Penguins, especially with some of these other guys on the board. I think Ottawa did really good picking up Logan Hensler. That's a really good pick for them, a defenseman. They traded for that pick from Nashville. That was a really solid selection for them. Will Horkoff was the other first round pick from the Penguins. So despite the Penguins having 3 first round picks in the top 25, you're kind of left wondering and questioning, like, what was really the idea here? They don't really seem like great picks and guys that really weren't expected to go where they did. Now, again, if Pittsburgh goes and has these guys turn out to be superstars, then everything we say today means absolutely nothing. But on draft day, there's definitely genuine concern about what the Penguins did with some of these picks. Riker Lee was the other pick here for the Nashville Predators, another United States player playing with the Madison Capitals. Good pickup for them. The Washington Capitals picked up Lyndon Lekovic, who played in the WHL with the Moose Jaw Warriors. A good pickup for them. The Jets picked up Sasha Boumedienne, who played at BU last season, so another Swedish defenseman taken off the board. And then to round things out, Mason West was another pick of the Blackhawks. They did really well in this year's draft. Again, picking up Mason West. I think picking up Frondell was really good for them too. And the good thing is these guys that play center can also learn to play the wing. It's easier to teach guys to play the wing from center than guys on the wing learning to be a center. It's a lot easier to develop a guy once they're already in that center role and moving them to the wing. So if that ends up happening, that's the luxury of choice if you're the Chicago Blackhawks. You'd rather have more of that than not enough. And I think this is, again, a good draft for teams like the Islanders, the Sharks. I think Nashville did pretty well. They moved down a couple times to pick up more picks later in the draft. I think in terms of teams that win and lose in this year's draft, I'm questioning what Pittsburgh really did. I think the Rangers, you can't really blame them. They wanted to win a Stanley Cup. So it's not like, they picked up JT Miller. They made their moves already. I think the Rangers are going to make more moves here going into July, depending on what happens with Zibanejad and Lafreniere and some of these other guys on the Rangers. I think it's open season for what they want to do. I think they're going to try and get a lot younger. They have guys like Brendan Ottman and Gabe Perreault in the system. I just think there's going to be a lot of change there. But in terms of what we saw on draft day and through the first couple rounds of the draft, there's a lot to be done still. We're going to find out what happens with Marner. Things are going to pick up very quickly here. So stay tuned to the channel. Hopefully you guys enjoy this content. I really enjoyed making it. It's been a minute since I've been making videos. I apologize for that. But I really appreciate you guys supporting the channel. As always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you again next time.